Should Nebraska be favored in 2024 in each of its first 7 games? We ask that question and discuss next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's a $150 in bonus bets with any winning bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Probably slow going today after a longer weekend, but we jump back into Husker football. We'll have plenty of baseball stuff coming up this week as Nebraska prepares for their opening round regional game against Florida on Friday. In fact, we might even talk about it a little bit during this show today. But there was a little football thing. We're in the mode of football right now where any little thing that comes out about the schedule, feels like it's important because we're in sort of this desert of the offseason at the moment. Action Network had a lineup for the Nebraska UTEP game, Nebraska's opener, and it was kind of eye-catching. 28 points they had them, and it was I think that line was actually from the Caesars Sportsbook, and they kind of just aggregate the lines together, and they get them from different places and stuff like that. So there's at least one book out there that has Nebraska as a 4-touchdown favorite against UTEP in the season opener. I thought that was that. Any thought, Mitch, first of all, on just the size of that number right out of the gate, especially considering what Nebraska's offense was last year?
Well, first, I'm glad you explained where that came from because I spent far too much time here on Tuesday morning trying to research when that line was posted and where exactly it came from. And I ended up just saying it's out there somewhere, and the Action Network picked it up. So
yeah.
It's from Caesars. Good. Okay. If that's the case, I believe you. It's a lot. That's a lot, I think, for Nebraska to be favored by against any opponent, unless it's an FCS school. So again, UTEP is not the class of Nebraska's schedule, not even the class of Nebraska's non-conference schedule. But I think 28 in the opener, when you're generally a little bit rusty and you're bringing a new quarterback along, that's a number that's indicative, I think, of where the books feel that Nebraska fans' faith sits in this team.
I'm interested in, and we have a bigger question coming up in a second, but I'm interested in the idea that, and I know you guys over at The Athletic put together a prediction on the first 3 weeks of the television schedule. And that, who was that again? Who wrote that piece?
Was that a Scott Docterman piece? He dives into a lot of TV stuff.
There was a lot of stuff in there. I was reading through it over the weekend.
I'll try to read all of our content.
They had sorry to put you on the spot. They had Nebraska and UTEP as a CBS game, as the 2:30 CBS game on the opening week. And then I kind of thought about Dylan Raiola like as a TV draw. Obviously, the Big Ten slate is pretty weak in the first week of the season, and I kind of thought, that's sort of interesting. If Nebraska is there is a case to be made probably that Nebraska is going to be an intriguing team to watch. It might pull some people in nationally in the first few weeks of the season. And the great news is they have a pretty sweet lead up. Obviously, with the exception of the Colorado game, UTEP, Northern Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, and Indiana. Not that guaranteed all those games are going to be wins, but there's a chance that Nebraska is going to be favored in, potentially all of them. We've already seen early lines for the Colorado game. Nebraska is almost a touchdown favorite in some of those that I've seen so far, and then we'll get the other ones to sort of trickle out. So it'll be a nice kind of ramp up for Nebraska, all at the same time while people are starting to, I think, maybe pay attention, or they're at least curious about what Dylan Raiola could potentially bring to the team.
I might have to disagree with that prediction that you saw on The Athletic.
Yeah.
I think that might be a night game, but it's, it's anyone's guess. It's up
That'd
to
be
the TV
Peacock then,
networks.
because they already have Fresno and Michigan on the NBC game that week, I think.
Okay. We're going to get some of this stuff figured out possibly this week. There's been this
Yeah.
promise like by the end of May. And if you look at the calendar, June 1st is Saturday. So the end of May
Yeah.
is coming. And I think we're going to get some TV times. UTEP, we'll get Rutgers, likely. Iowa, the kickoff time has yet to be set, but I think you can kind of deduce when that's going to be based on the NFL schedule on Black Friday, which was new to the mix last year and is continuing this year. And then some of those road games, like the homecoming games, which is all of them except Iowa, that those tend to get set early too. So we might get a whole big bag of kickoff times, and that UTEP one is interesting to me. One, because it's the first and it's August 31st, so it would have the potential to be hot. That would be kind of an odd one to put on Peacock, I think. Dylan Raiola's debut, or presumed debut as the starter at Nebraska. But Nebraska might push for that, just in the sense that it would like to get a dry run at that night game situation before the Buffs come to town a week later.
Interesting. Yeah, that might be the case as well. But anyway, like they have this kind of lead up here where, like I said, outside of the Colorado game, it's, there's UTEP and Northern Iowa in the first few weeks of the season, and those games are obviously very winnable. Then you go into conference play with about the easiest start to conference play you can imagine. Not a guarantee that Nebraska wins all those games, obviously, but it's as soft of a landing as you can imagine. Mitch, they might be favorites in each of their first 7 games before you even get to, late October and into November.
Yeah, I think when the schedule first came out, that was kind of the thought was, hey, Nebraska's got an opportunity to really start well, and then things get difficult in October, obviously starting with a bang going to Ohio State. But now as the season is starting to take a little bit more, take on a little bit more shape, and you have some clarity here as to what some of these teams are going to look like, I do think there's a real possibility that Nebraska will be favored in all of these 7 games. Seen some early numbers out on Colorado. Also, we talked about the 28-point line against UTEP, and I've seen Nebraska favored. Have you seen anything on that? But I've seen them like a touchdown favorite, which
not a
seems
touchdown.
somewhat
Yeah,
surprising.
I saw 6.5 a few weeks ago. Yeah, I imagine it's still the same.
Yeah, that's a little surprising. They'll be favored against Northern Iowa. They'll probably be favored against Illinois at home. At Purdue, yeah, possibly. And that's where you start to get into, okay, how are these teams faring? I could certainly see them favored against Rutgers in Lincoln, and then you go to Indiana. So that's another possibility, a likelihood to be favored. It's reminiscent of 2016 when Nebraska started 7-0 before it went to Wisconsin and then lost in overtime. So that was Mike Riley's second year. Now here we are in Matt Rhule's second year. I think some of the comparisons between 2016 and 2024, they stop right there. But the way the schedule sets up is similar. And obviously, if you're favored in all of those games, it guarantees nothing. But it definitely gives you a chance, if you're Nebraska, to really start off in a positive way.
It's so funny. 2016 is the one obviously we go to because they started off 7-0 that year, and then they went to Camp Randall and lost in overtime. But like the schedule composition, the similarities are pretty amazing. I mean, you had a premier non-con game that year at home against a West. I mean, it's not a Pac-12 team obviously anymore. RIP the Pac-12, but Oregon was in 2016 and Colorado is in the Big 12 now. So those kind of are corollaries. They're parallel to each other. Fresno State and Wyoming were the other 2 non-con games that year. And you started off conference play with Northwestern, Illinois, Indiana, Purdue. 3 of those teams are the exact same teams that are on this schedule for this year. And then the other one being Rutgers instead of Northwestern, which, I mean, that's pretty amazing. That's a really soft landing. I don't know how that happened. It's just, it's just the luck of the draw and kind of what you get. But I mean, obviously we've talked about it for weeks and months now. The schedule is seriously backloaded. But it's crazy to think about just the gigantic split between really all the way leading into mid-October and then what happens after that.
What's really amazing is that college football has undergone this massive change heading into 2024 with realignment. You got the 12-team playoff, all the new money that's out there. That was more in 2023. But I mean, there are significant changes that have happened over the last 12 months in this sport. And here we go starting this season, and it's like a throwback to 2016, not just in the way the schedule sets up, but in the actual teams that Nebraska plays to open the Big Ten. So it's like the more things change, the more they stay the same. But once you get to Halloween and the week before Halloween, that's when I think the reality of like what college football is today and what it will be moving forward just kind of slaps Nebraska in the face. And that's great. That's a great situation for Matt Rhule that he gets this additional runway. It's almost like an extension of year one to some degree. And I just mean that in the sense that like year one is about proving yourself. They've got 7 more games to be able to prove themselves and who they are as a program before the what hits the fan. And then you have to be the Nebraska that you want to be for the last stretch of 24.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, you're so right about that. Now, we'll only be saying that if they take advantage of it. Obviously, if it goes the other way, then there's some risk involved there. All right, let's take a quick timeout here. We'll come back in the second segment. We'll sort of get you caught up on what we're looking for from Nebraska football over the next week or so as players begin to make their way back to campus for summer sessions and summer workouts and things like that. But first, remember to subscribe and follow us on Twitter. @LockedOnNEB. You can send us an email, lockedonneb@gmail.com as well. We'll be back and with more after this. All right, here we go. It is conference finals in the NBA, the NHL. We are getting very, very close to the finals in both sports. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet, $150 to bet on spreads and money lines, player props, and more. Go to FanDuel Sportsbook right now and take a look at the game in the NBA tonight. We might get 2 sweeps in the NBA, and then we don't start the finals for another week. So it might be one of your final opportunities to do so for this period of time. The Mavs going for the sweep tonight against the Timberwolves. The Celtics got it done last night. You can bet on that and so much more on the FanDuel Sportsbook. So when you go, use FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. That is with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Welcome back on this Tuesday. The Memorial Day weekend, Connor, is over. Rest in peace to Bill Walton. Shocking news Monday. We were recording the show and got done, took my put my microphone away, and then there's the news that that Bill Walton, the NBA great and just extraordinary broadcaster, had passed away out of the blue.
He kept that very quiet. They characterize it as a prolonged battle with cancer. I don't, maybe I just didn't have my ear to the ground, but I never heard that he was sick at all. He was still broadcasting up until I think the middle of the Pac-12 basketball season last year. Man, you want to talk about it. And that's a guy who was obviously a fantastic NBA player, is known for that for the majority of his life, and then gets a microphone in front of him and it takes on a whole new life, and we get to kind of like understand him and know him as a person more, which was great for us. That guy just loved living, which he showed that every day. So he will definitely be missed in the college sports world and in the sports world in general.
Absolutely. So long weekend. I know you had a few days away from your radio gig. Did you feel like you got a lot accomplished over the Memorial Day weekend?
Just stuff pops up, man. Like I did get out and mow, and I actually I took my time a little bit. I didn't feel like I had to squeeze it in. We can use this segment for grass talk again if you want to, but Yeah, I mean, obviously,
It's thriving. The grass is
great.
thriving. Yeah.
It's looking really great. Now,
If it's not, you got issues.
I'm not responsible for any of it. That's Mother Nature, obviously,
Mhm.
but I feel like I've accomplished something by the grass looking good. So that was nice. No, I don't feel like I got anything accomplished. I just feel like it was a long weekend.
Okay.
And I even took Thursday and Friday off so I had a super long weekend, and now we're just right back into it. Kind of geared up for College World Series. We're getting closer and closer to that too.
Yeah, it's hard to get back in after Memorial Day. I think it's maybe the holiday that's just the most difficult to dig back in because everybody around, at least in my world, everybody around is like on to summer and like they're going to the pool last night and activities are starting and like I spent a lot of time on the baseball field myself in my coach's shirt this Memorial Day weekend and of course watching baseball. Some family activities. We had a big event that had been in the works for like 6 months. That weather was a big concern coming into this weekend, but it all went off fantastic on Sunday. And then yesterday, I got to clean the garage at my wife's instruction.
Okay, that's getting ahead.
That was yeah, I don't have the words to describe how much I enjoy cleaning the garage, but got to do it. So it's that time of year. It's the time of year where you just you have to get things in order for what's next, and that's kind of to transition back into Nebraska football.
Nice.
It's kind of what's going on in Lincoln, Connor. You can see I'm a pro.
That's good
at this thing now. We're like 35 episodes in, and I'm talking about cleaning my garage and how it impacts. Nebraska football is cleaning its garage ahead of the next phase of the college football calendar. So to catch people up on what's going on, this is the last week where it's like extreme. Just there's not much on the calendar here in the last week of May. The players have been off since final exams. They're starting to come back into Lincoln this week. A lot of them are getting back or are there now. They'll be officially reporting this coming weekend, like June 1st, for their summer training programs. And then on the coaching side of it, they're coming off the road after what's been a really busy May of going out and seeing recruits and going to high schools. And then next week, the coaches will be back on the road. They've got some satellite camp activity in and around the state of Texas. And by the end of the week, the camps in Lincoln start. So June 7th is a week from Friday, and that's Nebraska's Friday Night Lights Camp, which is the official kickoff to the on-campus season for camping, which, as we saw last year, is very productive, or Nebraska wants that to be a huge part of what it does in recruiting each season. So expect some many prospects on campus and several commitments to come out of that camp session. That series of camp sessions.
I wonder with things getting back into the swing a little bit toward the end of the week and into the weekend, how much of a Nebraska football coach's presence you might see in Stillwater, Oklahoma this weekend as Nebraska tries to pump their way through an NCAA regional.
That's a great question. Usually coaches like hold off on that until teams get to Omaha. Like you always see, the big name coaches come to Omaha. Not so typical for regionals, but if there's anybody who would do it, it would be this Nebraska coaching staff. Gosh, I don't know. I don't know what would now the Nebraska. Hey, if there's anybody also who can give advice on like how to navigate all of that, think about like Will Bolt and Rob Childress and their history of having gone to Stillwater. That's going to be one thing for Nebraska, and we'll talk some Nebraska baseball in the next segment. But they've been there and they've done that and they've experienced that atmosphere. But I don't know. I'd be curious. I'm going to guess no that Troy Dannon will be there, but you're not going to see Matt Rhule in Stillwater. That's my prediction. If he proves me wrong, I will put another feather in his cap for just his incredible support of other programs. He was tweeting, and Ed Foley was tweeting.
Oh yeah,
and
they were out
others
there
over the weekend. Yeah, from Omaha.
They were out there sitting, baking in the sun. That's the thing about when the other coaches come for the College World Series. They're they got the suites, and usually from talking to them, they'll come in the day of the game, and they'll take the private jet in. They'll put the jet down, and they'll hop out. And I'll ask them, hey, how do you like Omaha? They're like, I don't really know. It doesn't even feel like I'm here right now. I'm just at the baseball game. And after this, I'm going to hop back on the plane, go home and eat dinner. That's basically the thing. That would not be the case, obviously, with Nebraska coaches if they're out and about for any sort of postseason play.
Matt, if Nebraska makes it to Omaha, as Will Bolt said, 5 wins away. He said, you saw these 13,000 people who were here on Sunday. Imagine that with a full stadium. We're 5 wins away. So that was a good, succinct way to say it. If Nebraska made it to Omaha as a baseball program, you think Matt Rhule would be, where would he go? Do you think he'd go to like the mattress factory? Would he hang out at the Hilton bar?
Oh no. Too swanky for him. Too swanky. He's
okay.
Going to the, I mean, he's a chameleon. He can adapt to the circumstances around him. Obviously, he could go a little nice in the wine crowd if he wanted to. But I feel like the heart of Matt Rhule is probably in the old Matt with a rum bucket or something like that, just getting ready to go, mingling with the people.
I could see him at DJ's dugout. I could see him going in to Let It Fly. I think that would someday, maybe this year, maybe in a couple weeks, someday, Nebraska baseball with Matt Rhule is going to be a thing in Omaha, and he is going to be a man of the people, buying drinks for the fans in red, and everyone will be talking about it. It'll be like this. It'll be like a viral moment for him again.
One more question about people. I don't know how we got off on this topic, but Texas A&M is a national seed. What happens when the athletic director wants to make a quick flight up to Omaha if they end up making the field? That could be fun, interesting. Yeah. Wonder where he might go.
Yeah, he might go to the suite. I think. Look, if this had been 2 months ago, you saw what he did with basketball, and he had just gotten on the job, but he didn't make that trip to Memphis. Was it Memphis? Yes, it was Memphis. To watch the Ags and the Huskers playing basketball. I understand that. I think Trev Alberts would be fine in Omaha. I think the College World Series is just a different animal, and people would be okay with Trev coming back. All right, we're going to get a little bit more into baseball after that segment there, which, as I said, went off the rails, but that was kind of the intention. So first, though, if you are watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, you know that you've got to turn down the volume with all that shouting. So make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news. It's streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV Channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Okay, we're back. A little baseball as we get you out of here on a Tuesday as we look ahead to Nebraska's regional opener against Florida on Friday. Go back and listen to our show from yesterday. We kind of covered it from a few different angles with Nebraska baseball making their way through the Big Ten tournament and also their regional setup. We did the show right after the NCAA selection show with plenty of local podcast drops on there. So we got the reaction pod right out there right away. But Friday, 2:00 against Florida in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So here's the thing about Florida, and they're kind of mixed up in this ongoing conversation regarding a few different topics around college baseball, whether it's the presence of the SEC, the determination of how teams get into the field. They went 13-17 in their league, but they had a really good RPI. Now, at the same time, their team ERA is 6.27. They were 7-8 against the 5 teams from the SEC that are hosting regionals as national seeds. So, I mean, that we're talking about Arkansas, Texas A&M, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia. Yeah, they're up and they're down. Florida tends to at least take one game from all of those type of teams. So the
Mhm.
story here is you don't know what you really don't know what you're going to get from a team like Florida, who is a strong national type of program, but has not been as good as maybe we're used to them being this year.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely not. I mean, this is a team that took LSU to the final game in Omaha a year ago. So, um, as we discussed on the Monday show, they've got Jack Caglione, and I failed in my research to try to find out if he was in fact going to be up for consideration to start against Nebraska. That'll be an ongoing topic as the week goes on, and I have no idea. They may be giving it some thought. They may be giving it no thought, but it's been a trouble spot for Florida all year to find an ace, and they lost a ton of talent to the professional draft last summer and have had a hard time replacing that. So that is essentially the reason that Florida is 13-17 coming into this postseason and just one game above 500 overall. So, Connor, I heard something interesting. I saw this making the rounds on social media on Monday afternoon. But did you hear the comments from Charleston coach Chad Holbrook
Yeah.
after his team, which finished 41-14 and won the Coastal Athletic Association, was left out of the 64 team field?
I did. I did. And it was there's a lot of teams, and this has sparked this whole conversation about expanding the field and all that. And I don't know what you do in situations like this. Obviously, he was frustrated. They felt like they had checked all of the boxes. And there's a lot of teams that got left on the side that felt like they had checked a whole bunch of boxes and got left out of the field in favor of teams like Florida. I mean, that's why Florida comes up in this conversation, because they were the big power. It's similar to the conversation we have in basketball. High major teams with big pedigrees who maybe don't have great years, but they tend to get in the field based on whatever it is they get in on, not necessarily because their resume looks better than the teams aside from them. It's an interesting ongoing conversation, but just to get out in front of it, I don't know that I love the idea of expanding the field. I think you just kind of have to do it a little bit better.
There's always going to be some teams that feel like they got shortchanged, and Holbrook, people know his name around this part of the country because he was the South Carolina coach who succeeded Ray Tanner, and Tanner won multiple national championships at Carolina, and then Holbrook was his assistant and took over and didn't do as well from 2013 to 17. And he was in tears on Monday talking about his team getting left out, and what he said that kind of brings it back to this topic of what's going on with Nebraska this weekend is, and I looked this up to verify. He said, I lost my job after going 13-17 in conference play, and here the selection committee is rewarding teams, 5 teams from the SEC, including Florida, that went 13-17 and made it into the field. So Holbrook's team at South Carolina in 2017 finished 35-25 overall and 13-17 in the SEC. Were not selected for the tournament, and he resigned under pressure after that season. So, it is an interesting topic for college baseball. Charleston had an RPI of 40. That was one spot ahead of Illinois, which got an at-large out of the Big Ten. It was more than 10 spots ahead of Indiana, which got an at-large out of the Big Ten. And then some of the other teams that got at-larges that were below Charleston in the RPI were Texas, Kansas State, Georgia Tech, a bunch of major conference teams that got the benefit of the doubt, and you don't see it happen to a mid-major like Charleston. So I think he's got a reason to be upset, and a team like Florida is the benefactor of his disappointment.
Yeah. Things that other people noticed was that if you had representation on the selection committee, that you were going to have a pretty good chance to get a pretty good situation. East Carolina got a host spot. They had a person on the committee. Indiana was a bubble team. They had a person on the committee. And I think there was another one in there too. Well, I think Indiana State maybe had somebody on the committee, but they ended up getting screwed. So maybe that thought isn't completely, isn't completely well thought out. But that was one of the things that was sort of mentioned yesterday as well. It's an odd process. Like, it's an inexact science. Teams are going to get left out, but I certainly feel for the non-SEC teams. 11 SEC teams made the tournament. And they're always going to get the benefit of the doubt because of the conference that they play in.
Yeah. So, career goal for Troy Dannon is to get on the baseball committee, and then he can make things work for Nebraska to have an easy path to get to Omaha, so we can see Matt Rhule out among the people to just bring this whole thing back full circle.
Get him a rum bucket at the old Matt. All right, that's it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow. Some more stuff coming at you throughout the week, of course, as well, and we're with you every day. And speaking of that, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app.